A driverless taxi in China. The high-tech country has become a superpower and is now often outpacing the West. But it hasn't always followed the rules.
Espionage has been used to gain a competitive advantage.
The country's ascent was carefully planned.
If we should learn one thing from the Chinese, it would be to stay on strategy.
Europe's relationship with China is precarious.
The moment China says it will no longer supply us, the lights will go out in Europe.
China is a trading partner and a rival, a difficult balancing act.
Anybody that engages with the Chinese economically is automatically empowering the Chinese strategic goals.
They will have 1,000 nuclear warheads by 2030. So we clearly have to be mindful of their role in the world.
Shenzhen, the tech heart of the People's Republic of China. The city seems to be from another time, the future. Carsten Sens works for tech giant Huawei. He wants to show us how far innovation and technology have already changed life in China. Shenzhen is in the far southeast of the country. The heat is overbearing. How about an iced tea? But where?
Another 384 meters to go.
In China, the tea finds you.
Here it comes.
The drone delivers our drink. Landing pads are located throughout the city.
There's our tea.
This technology is still novel, even for the people of Shenzhen.
Limits on thinking don't seem to exist in China. If someone can imagine it, it can happen, and happen very quickly. A storm front is moving in.
What now?
I'll call us a taxi with the app.
Our taxi is driverless.
We still have to go a little further. The pickup point is back there. Okay, it should be here. Yes, there it is. The white one with something on the roof.
A Japanese car with Chinese software.
It says, start ride in Chinese. I'll press that. We have to make a U-turn, which is always one of the most challenging traffic situations for an autonomous driving system. But you can see that even though there's another car coming, it didn't stop. It managed the U-turn relatively smoothly.
Innovative technologies are actively promoted in China. President Xi Jinping has an ambitious dream.
We want to make China a great modern socialist country that is prosperous, strong, and culturally advanced by the middle of this century.
Xi Jinping speaks publicly about democracy, but leads his country with autocratic might. China and its all-powerful Communist Party hope to soon catch up with the US. And Shenzhen is the poster child of this ambition. The tech metropolis has more skyscrapers above 200 meters tall than anywhere else in the world. New York was left behind years ago. But the town had a population of just 30,000 in 1980 when Deng Xiaoping declared the area a special economic zone. The country opened to outsiders, and foreign businesses were encouraged to call Shenzhen their home in China. Workers from all over China flocked to the booming metropolis, a drastic transformation in just a decade.
The former fishing village is now a cosmopolitan city of 750,000.
Almost 18 million people now live in the megacity. China often appears to be far ahead of Europe, testing technologies that might not catch on elsewhere for years. Why so many green license plates? They denote electric cars. China backs its own electric car makers, while Europe argues over combustion engines. And which do Chinese consumers prefer? Homegrown or German import?
We usually choose Chinese electric cars.
I would choose Chinese.
Chinese, of course.
We already have a Chinese electric car.
German electric cars, do they exist?
They do, but they have long fallen behind. China is now the world's largest car manufacturer and exporter, and has become the leader in electric cars. Chinese manufacturers now want a bigger piece of the European market. But the country is already far ahead in at least one other European market. We're on our way to a secret location in Berlin, the German capital. Andreas Kroll wants to show us something very special. Behind this security door lies the lifeblood of German industry, rare earth minerals. They are irreplaceable and are becoming increasingly important. Most of Europe's rare minerals are mined or processed in China, an immense risk.
A blockade around Taiwan would likely result in massive disruptions to supply chains, eventually halting production lines here.
And if China invaded rather than just blockaded Taiwan, would the West intervene? Military exercises already practice this scenario in the Indo-Pacific. Or would other countries stay away because they need China's rare earth minerals? China is already using its monopoly on rare resources for political gain. The People's Republic dramatically expanded its export controls on rare minerals as a response to U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs. China isn't the only source and producer of rare earth minerals, but it's using its clout to flood the market and elbow out less affluent competitors. Without China, the global economy would fail, and yet its rise is also at risk.
My name is Michael Beckley, and I'm a political scientist that's been studying China's rise for many years.
Professor Beckley is a China analyst and advisor to the U.S. Department of Defense.
China is no longer an unstoppable economic power. Its rise is basically coming to an end.
China's real estate bubble is becoming a problem. Far too much using state funds. Even new buildings often face a wrecking ball, and there are even more existential problems.
Given that China has destroyed about 40% of its farmlands through pollution and sucking too much water out of it, China can't feed itself anymore. And as a result, it's the top food importer in the world. China also used to have lots of working age people compared to senior citizens. That also has flipped. So just from a demographic and an environmental perspective, it's just much harder for China to grow rapidly today than it was even as recently as 10 years ago.
Michael Beckley is afraid China will offset its economic woes with military aggression.
The historical records suggest we have to be very concerned about a China that is flailing. In some ways, it's a more explosive near-term threat.
Is China a threat to an unexpectedly precarious world order? NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte said as much in early 2025.
China clearly is an adversary, and they are imposing a increasing threat. We are watching the build-up of the Chinese Navy, the military. They will have 1,000 nuclear warheads by 2030. So we clearly have to be mindful of their role in the world, and they are also a main enabler at this moment of the war in Ukraine. So they're supporting the Russians, working together with North Korea, working together with Iran.
The concerns aren't just theoretical. China's long arm may have already reached as far as the Bavarian forest. The German government believes Chinese agents hacked into this facility. This observatory belongs to the Federal Agency for Cartography and Geodesy and creates precise data for navigation systems, from GPS to Galileo. The facility in Wetzel, Bavaria, was supposedly targeted by hackers in 2021. What happened? The Federal Office for Information Security investigates such hacking attempts. The Cyber Defense Center keeps an eye on Germany's networks around the clock and is increasingly seeing attacks from China. And it's no longer limited to just industrial espionage.
Things have changed significantly in the past few years. We are seeing more attacks on government institutions, political parties, and foundations. A clear shift from the technology and business sector to the political arena.
Robert Formanek is part of the BSI task force that reacts when government agencies come under attack. In 2021, he received a tip that hackers had broken into the Federal Agency for Cartography and Geodesy, or BKG.
It was just before Christmas, on December 16th, when we called the BKG after we learned of a possible attack. Not many people were in the building then.
Robert Formanek and his team looked at how the hackers got into the system and what they wanted.
We then discovered that the gateway was a vulnerability on a server that primarily serves Wetzel, the location of a geo-observatory that exchanges data internationally and compiles these coordinates for air traffic control and other purposes.
The hackers used the system in Wetzel to move throughout the entire federal system.
If I'm a government official and I'm preparing basic data for a navigation system that is used, for example, by German air traffic control, then I can no longer be 100% sure that all the data is correct.
The consequences could be serious. The BSI president urges caution in all areas of life, as any one of us could be affected.
Imagine you have digital children's toys. Depending on the manufacturer, you could have a listening device in your child's room. The same issue applies in 5G technology, for example. A player from another country can have wide reach and influence on the equipment. And this can be abused.
Officials are especially cautious with one repeat offender, who is also arguably China's most internationally successful business, Huawei. Huawei's Carsten Sens has his own opinion of his employer's role in this international spy thriller. Huawei has recreated monuments from 12 European cities at its research campus in the middle of a Chinese megacity.
We'll go up here first, inside the Sorbonne University in Paris. Then we'll take a little golf cart and drive from Paris to Granada. Then to Bologna, and from there directly to the old town of Heidelberg.
Huawei. The company is less than 40 years old, but has long been a global player. Over 100 billion euros in revenue, more than 200,000 employees, and a research campus the size of 200 soccer fields.
Alhambra, Granada. Wow, I had forgotten the famous Alhambra in Granada. Anyway, we're driving from here, round the back, into Heidelberg's old town. Now we can see Heidelberg Castle on our right. The difference between this and the real Heidelberg Castle is that the real castle is a ruin. Here we have rebuilt it in all its beauty.
The campus cost more than $1.2 billion and employs nearly 30,000 people.
Everything that looks old European here is very modern on the inside. 5G, cloud computing, data centers, all of this is being researched here.
The company's rail system, with its 3 lines, is often the quickest route. The site's message is unmistakable: money, power, and success. Life was good when it was built. Huawei's dominance in mobile phones and networks kept it in an upward spiral while making it famous around the world. Its market share increased despite stiff competition from Apple and Samsung. But that changed in December 2018.
We feared for our company's survival. I remember that day very well. I woke up in the morning and checked my phone like every day. That's when I saw the news. A big shock.
Huawei Chief Financial Officer Wanzhou Meng, who is also the daughter of Huawei founder Zhengfei Ren, was arrested in Canada on behalf of the US, which wanted her extradited. Huawei was accused of violating sanctions against Iran. Things grew more serious just a few months later. The US government accused the company of being a potential threat to its national security and foreign policy objectives. American companies and those using American technology were no longer allowed to supply Huawei. Huawei smartphones would have to go without Google's Android operating system.
I believe we had more than 3,000 suppliers then, and around 30% were originally from the United States. And when that suddenly disappears, you can easily imagine the scale of the crisis.
The company's sales plummeted. In the fall of 2021, Wang Zhomeng reached a settlement with U.S. prosecutors and was able to return to China. But the sanctions against Huawei remained. Some were even expanded. Why did America react so strongly?
So my name is Dr. Paul Coyer. I'm a research professor here at the Institute of World Politics, and I'm also have been very close to a number of figures around President Trump.
President Trump imposed sanctions on Huawei during his first term, and Paul Coyer knows why.
Any nation that controls information flows around the world, their intelligence services are going to have access to those. And the concern, of course, is that Huawei, as a Chinese state champion, is tightly tied, of course, to Chinese intelligence. So that is not just a concern. I think it's pretty obviously a fact that if Huawei's hardware is embedded in countries and continents around the world, the Chinese intelligence are automatically going to have access to all the information flows that goes through that hardware.
A strong accusation. But is it true? If, for example, the government in Beijing were to say to Huawei, you must do this and that, would Huawei have the option of saying, no, we won't?
First of all, we don't even have that kind of option. Like when it comes to whether we transfer data to China, we couldn't even do it. It's not even possible.
Can you rule out Huawei passing on European data to Chinese authorities?
Yes.
Definitively?
Yes.
But Huawei kept making headlines. An audit that became public in 2020 showed how Huawei technology could help control oppressed minorities. An AI camera system, which Huawei is said to have tested together with another company, was developed to automatically identify members of the oppressed Uyghur minority and potentially highlight the person. It is not known whether the system was ever used. Huawei confirmed the document's authenticity, but said the software came from a third-party provider and was only tested on Huawei systems. But the accusations didn't stop there. Huawei has since recovered economically. It now has its own operating system, has found other chip suppliers, and has entered new markets. But the U.S. wasn't alone in sanctioning the company. Many European countries followed suit. Margrethe Vestager was EU Competition Commissioner until 2024. She understands why.
The risk if you have technology in your core networks and you don't know if you can trust the supplier is, of course, that your communication is being tapped, that your data is being moved, that you cannot say for granted our communication is actually only between us and not between us and some Chinese state official. Because, of course, it's a risk. It's not something that necessarily materializes.
This risk is why Huawei is excluded from Germany's core network, the central control element of the telecommunications system. What does this exclusion from the core network mean for your company?
We'll have to wait and see. We are hardly represented in the core network anyway. It should not have a major impact on our business.
The allegations didn't stop there. 8 members of the European Parliament signed a letter in 2021. They praised the advantages of 5G technology and criticized the unfounded fears of some EU member states about the technology's security risks. The letter was also addressed to then-Commissioner Margrethe Vestager.
We think that there may be risks to using Huawei equipment. It was a very long process to assess those risks and to give member states a toolbox to be able to do away with the risks.
Was the letter an attempt by Huawei to influence Brussels? Belgian investigators looked into whether EU politicians and their staff had been bribed by Huawei. The company told us it hadn't been informed about the allegations. Huawei said, "We take the ongoing investigations seriously, and Huawei has a zero-tolerance policy toward corruption." At least one of the 8 EU parliamentarians who signed the 5G letter denied the allegations. While the investigation is underway in Brussels, Carsten Sens is waiting for more information in China. German-Chinese relations may now be strained, but they were once fueled by ambitions on both sides, centered surprisingly on an inland port in the western German city of Duisburg. Xi Jinping visited the industrial city in 2014. Duisburg was to become the terminus of the new Silk Road, a direct rail connection between China and Duisburg. The new Silk Road is a global infrastructure project to improve trade routes to and from China. Germany was to play a key role. Many in Duisburg hoped Chinese companies would soon call their city home, with plans to build a trade center. But the hopes never materialized. Relations between China and Germany cooled, and big business deals around Duisburg were never signed. But Duisburg wasn't the only failed stretch of China's new Silk Road. In the U.S., some consider the new Silk Road a major loss for China, including Michael Beckley. $1 trillion has already been poured into the mammoth project through direct investments as well as loans to partner countries.
There's no prospect of them ever recouping the amount of investment that was initially put in. Even Chinese government estimates suggest at least half of that money will not be paid back because these countries are so poor and a lot of these projects are not generating returns to make that money back.
China is getting deeper and deeper into debt. Beckley believes the official Chinese figures are embellished, further increasing his worries.
There's massive debt in China. The conservative estimates suggest that China's debt pile, if you add up the government debt, the local government debt, consumer debt, and business debt, it's over 3 times the size of China's entire economy.
But China is still on the hunt for partners for its new Silk Road. And Hungary's Viktor Orbán is more than willing. The partnership could have a major impact on the EU. How deep is the relationship between China and Hungary? The project includes the Budapest-Belgrade Railway, which should eventually improve connections to the largely Chinese investor-owned port of Piraeus in Greece. Goods could soon be transported directly to the EU using this portion of the new Silk Road. But the railway is controversial. In Duna-Varshani, Chinese companies are converting an old rail route into a dual-track high-speed line through the small town 40 kilometers south of Budapest. Local councillor Béla Veregszegházi is not happy.
The increase in rail traffic would destroy this very pleasant, livable small town, this almost village-like atmosphere. And there will be long lines every morning and afternoon.
The new express railway line will divide the small town in two. Many Chinese people work at the construction site.
Excuse me, are you from China? And you are working here? We don't accept interviews.
Chinese state-owned companies did not respond to our written inquiries about the construction project. But Councillor Veregszegházi knows where the workers live. A sign with Chinese characters at a container village just 10 minutes away.
I'll park in a side street, okay? They probably won't be happy to see us.
No one wants to answer our questions here either, nor do the employees want to be filmed. Some even try to prevent us from filming from the street. 3 workers eventually approach us.
Who is talking? I don't understand. Hello?
Their lawyer. They want to stop our investigation.
You are in Europe and you are building a railway line, so it's interesting. Why not?
China is building its new Silk Road here, but on Hungary's dime. The project is being financed largely with a $1 billion loan from China, a massive sum for a small country like Hungary. But Hungary thinks it will profit soundly from the project and expects Chinese companies to become part of its economy. No other European country is currently receiving as much investment from Chinese companies. 44% of all direct Chinese investment in Europe went to Hungary in 2023. New Chinese factories are springing up everywhere. Little surprise.
My name is Agnes Sunomar. I'm an associate professor here at Corvinus University of Budapest.
Professor Sunomar understands the strategy behind China's investments.
The Chinese consider Hungary as a very important partner, mainly because we are EU member countries. So we are an important partner for China because we are in the EU.
Hungary is the door to the EU, and China is getting the red carpet treatment.
I think in many other European countries there is a bit of reluctance, if not just a plain thank you but no thank you. The Hungarians, they have a different approach. They don't mind letting China have sort of a bridgehead in Hungary.
What are China's plans in Hungary? Chinese companies are already investing billions of dollars in the northeast, which is much poorer than Budapest, the Hungarian capital. Debrecen is currently home to one of the largest construction sites in the country.
Hello, Frau Silvio. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. I'm Noemi.
It's a pleasure for us to see you here.
A gigantic factory is being built here on an area almost the size of 60 soccer fields. The plant will soon begin manufacturing battery cells for electric cars.
We will go around a little bit to the entrance, but we cannot go inside, of course, because the construction is ongoing.
CATL is investing around 7.4 billion euros in this plant. The Chinese company controls almost 40% of the global market for electric car batteries.
The building is ready, but the mechanical and electrical installation is going on, and the machines are on the way.
On the way from China to Europe, because European manufacturers play hardly any role in the battery market. When the factory is finished, 9,000 workers will make battery cells here.
At the moment, we have about 25% of our employees are Chinese colleagues. They are coming for a certain period of time and then pass the knowledge to a Hungarian colleague, and then they leave.
Chinese experts are to train European workers in an increasingly important technology.
Practically all of the car makers or car manufacturers are dependent on the currently available batteries.
And most of them are Chinese. Car manufacturers in other parts of the world also rely on Chinese battery makers. Not a problem. Yet. China doesn't want to be just a supplier. It wants to build and sell electric cars. In Szeged, in southern Hungary, electric cars developed in China will soon roll off the production line. BYD plans to start producing electric cars here in 2026 for the European market. The Chinese are hoping low prices will allow them to conquer the market for electric cars.
BYD cars are more affordable than the European or German ones, yet technologically are at the same level or sometimes even higher level. I think that they will play a role, definitely. So people will be eager to buy Chinese cars instead of Japanese or German cars.
The EU is trying to protect domestic car makers by imposing high tariffs on imported Chinese electric cars. But BYD wants to circumvent the tariffs by importing car parts rather than finished cars, and then assembling them in the EU.
It makes sense, especially after the tariffs imposed recently, to have production at European locations so as they can avoid paying tariffs.
BYD stands for Build Your Dreams, Chinese dreams that will soon be assembled in the heart of Europe for European customers and will flood the market with low prices. Former EU Commissioner Vestager sees it as unfair competition.
Already now, the Chinese e-vehicle production can more than satisfy global demand, which means that there is, if any other e-vehicle producer stopped today, there would still be enough e-vehicles for those who wanted one, just only from China. And the reason why it has come about to be like this is that it is highly likely that subsidies has gone in to enable BYD to build up this capacity.
Is China improperly subsidizing the BYD factory in Szeged? The EU Commission is also curious and is investigating. BYD declined to comment and ignored our written inquiries. But Chinese business in Hungary is about more than just money. Xi Jinping is a powerful partner for Viktor Orban. Hungary is moving further and further away from the EU and closer to China.
China supports Hungary in playing a bigger role in the EU and promoting greater progress in China-EU relations.
China is investing in Hungary, and Viktor Orban appears to be returning the favor to Xi Jinping. China, a country of contradictions, both internally and on the international stage. A giant full of promise and danger.
There is a risk if you are very dependent on someone who has a completely different system and wants to push it, that your sense of democracy and how to do it erodes. So I think it's really important that these economic factors, where we're still open to the world, but that we're able to do more ourselves, that I think will also support the European democracy. And as we see it in these years, democracy is not a given. It's something that you need to fight for. Otherwise, there is a risk that other ways will prevail.